Thank you, Madam President. It wasn't that long ago in the state of Oregon that if you were a person with a disability, you would be taken from your family. You would be brought to Salem to a place called Fairview. While you were there, you might expect not to ever see your family again. While you were there, you might expect to be put in restraints, leather restraints, up into the 1990s. You might expect to be castrated, forcibly sterilized, raped, and beaten, and to watch your friends die. You could expect to be put in scalding bathtubs. You could expect not to choose what time you woke up in the morning or what time you went to bed at night. You could expect that you wouldn't choose what food to eat or when you would be able to leave the facility because you were classified not as a person, but as an inmate. This is the life of an institution. Fortunately, Oregon closed its institution. It closed the Fairview Training Center with the last person leaving its doors in 2000. The people that left were happy to leave, and at the recent anniversary, we talked to some folks about how they felt about that time, and I just wanted to share some of their words. One person said, "I was handicapped, but it made me sicker to be there. It was like a prison, handcuff, shut door. I don't like it there. People mean." One resident described being disciplined with razor straps. "It stings really bad," said the person talking about being beaten with razor straps. Others recalled, "They were strict at Fairview. You got beat up, yelled at. They put us in closets. They used their shoes to spank us. And if you didn't behave yourself, they'd get you with the scalding hot water." We closed Fairview because it was the right thing to do. People with disabilities are human beings that deserve to live in the community and can live in the community. Oregon leads the nation in doing this. And when we sold the Fairview Training Center, we made a promise to the people that survived and left Fairview and to the memory of the people that were behind them, that we would take the proceeds of that trust from that place that stores up so many bad memories and put it into a trust that would guarantee the ability for people to live in the community. And we called it the Fairview Housing Trust. The proceeds from that trust, the interest, were to be used to invest in community-based housing for people with disabilities. When I worked at the Department of Human Services, I had the opportunity to serve on the Fairview Housing Trust Grant Committee when we were still issuing grants. And it was so difficult to choose between the many needs that were out there. I remember one application from a mother who was in her 80s. She wanted funding to help put together an accessible bathtub. In her 80s, she was still lifting her 60-year-old son, pulling him into a bathtub and climbing into the bathtub with him in order to bathe him. That's what this money in the Fairview Housing Trust is used for, to help these families, to help individuals make the accommodations that are needed to be able to live in the community. Unfortunately, a few years ago, the interest on the trust started to fall off. You can only spend the interest on the trust under the terms of the trust, so those grants stopped. And we went through a recession, and the legislature, at last session, took half of the money out of the Fairview Housing Trust, which was breaking the promise. But when we did that, we made a promise that it was a loan. We were borrowing it, and we were going to pay it back. And hopefully this session we will do that, despite the governor's proposed budget suggesting taking the rest of the money out of this trust, which is a sacred promise to the people with disabilities in the state of Oregon. We met with the Treasurer's Office to find out why these funds were not being spent. The problem is that the money is not invested properly. Senate Bill 616 will fix that. It will move the investment from the short-term investment trust to the medium-term or intermediate-term investments and allow us to generate the interest that's necessary to start doing these vital things again. It also calls on the Secretary of State to do an audit of the Fairview Housing Trust account, to look at where those monies went, what the terms of the trust agreement were, and whether or not we actually had the authority to take that money out of the Fairview Housing Trust previously. There is another bill that is a companion to this bill that's sitting in Ways and Means that will create a Fairview Housing Trust Advisory Committee that will look at the long-term needs of housing stock in the state for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live in the community, including what we are going to do with the bonds that are expiring on group homes that we have built. What will happen to those, and how will we make sure that that accessible housing remains available to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and how can we work on making this plan in the long term? Colleagues, Senate Bill 616 is the first step to correcting a mistake that we made in raiding this trust. We can increase the investments and we can keep our promise to people that we betrayed by leaving them there in an institution for so long. Fortunately, that's now part of our history. We need to keep it part of our history, and we need to maintain and protect the Fairview Housing Trust to keep our promise to these people to make sure that they have a bright and equal future. Thank you, Madam President.